my point was, I was like, okay, are you going to now try some kind of legal maneuver? Are you going to try to go get some kind of shark attorney who's going to look for some loophole and try to undermine what I'm doing in caring for my grandparents? So that's what, for me, it was. That phrase was, once we're in here doing this, are you suddenly going to wake to life like Vesuvius? And are you going to blow all over me like, I am so angry at you and how dare you do this?
Welcome to Aging in Style, the podcast dedicated to celebrating aging and what it takes to do it well. I'm Lori Williams. I'm a certified senior advisor and senior housing expert. In each episode, you'll learn stories of older adults who are thriving in their 70s, 80s, 90s, and in some cases in their hundreds. Whether you're an older adult or the child of an older adult, this podcast is filled with insightful resources, organizations that are doing incredible work, and stories that will inspire you to volunteer, learn, and who knows, maybe even skydive in your golden years. Hi, welcome to Aging in Style. We are talking about family relationships today, and this is a big one because there can be a lot of drama that happens and a lot of hurt feelings and things that happen in families when, say, mom or dad has Alzheimer's or has some other care needs that involve, everyone getting together and helping them. So we have a guest speaker today. We have Leah Stanley. She's going to share what she knows about this topic, and she knows a lot because she has been a caregiver and she has written 2 books. The book we're focusing on today is Caring for a Loved One with Alzheimer's or Other Dementia, and it's Everything I Wish I Had Known. Leah was the primary caregiver for her grandparents and later on for her parents. And she began writing about caring for loved ones with Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia to help those walking the same path. Leah was born in Memphis, Tennessee. She earned a bachelor's degree in journalism from the University of Memphis, and she has a background in corporate communications and freelance writing. And she's also available for speaking engagements. And I know you stay very busy with speaking engagements. Welcome, Leah.
Thank you so much, Lori. It's so great to be here.
Well, I'm glad you're here because this is such an important topic and something that comes up quite frequently when we're helping families to make that transition. It's a difficult thing to face when a parent or grandparent or spouse has dementia or, strokes, like in my case for my husband. And it's hard to know. You might think you're going to feel one way, and when you're in the midst of it, you feel a completely different way. And then it becomes more challenging when you have different, maybe several siblings involved and people are not on the same page. So let's talk about those family relationships and what you've seen. What do you think the main causes of these disagreements and family strife? What do you think causes that?
There's no simple answer to that, actually, because some of the childhood stress that occurred, mother always picked you as her favorite. So now I'm mad about it and I've grown up bitter about it. That can play a role. And sometimes, again, very legitimate. I don't ever want to sound like I'm taking away from that, like, oh, that's not a big deal. Yes, that is a very big deal. And then all of a sudden, mother needs help. One of the things I pointed out in the book is I say, can you imagine how Cinderella would feel if she was suddenly tapped to be her stepmother's caregiver? I mean, can you imagine the sheer teeth clenching rage that she would feel? I would not feel inclined to help you.
No.
So, things like that can lead into it. A lot of childhood trauma. Sometimes parents create an environment where they're very hard to please. So children grow up feeling like, well, I can't do anything right. And so therefore, why do I even want to try to take care of mother or father, whoever? In my case, that was not the case. I had an excellent relationship with my grandparents. I was so blessed to have that time. So for me, when it came time to take care of them, I was highly motivated to do absolutely everything that I could. But even in our family situation, people ask, why did the granddaughter have the care instead of like the child? Well, their son was my biological father, and he had decided being married to my mother was just not fulfilling. So he went and married that other lady, and they had kids. So then I wound up with, I had 2 half brothers that were in the situation. And so when it came time to provide the care, my grandparents had picked me. I was the one that had a relationship with them. My half brother's not as much. So my grandma was like, well, Leah, you're the one that we're going to get to do the care for us. I was like, absolutely, I'm glad to do it. But when it all came down, it was hard because all of a sudden now I was having to get in touch with these half brothers that I had no real relationship with. And, I talk about this in my first book, actually, Goodnight, Sweet, A Caregiver's Long Goodbye, which is where I told the story of my caregiving experience. And I shared about that. I told the good, bad, and ugly. And I was like, this was not an easy role. So there's all kinds of things that lead into why it's difficult to do this.
Did your stepbrothers, or half brothers, did they want to be involved and help? Or were they feeling like, well, why are you the one and not us?
One of them lived well out of town, so he was not readily available. The other one lived closer. And give a little secret, sort of a tease from the book. I talked about the fact that when I contacted them, before they could get to the nursing home to visit our grandparents, they got a moving van and drove it basically past the nursing home, 2.5 hours up to where my grandparents' home was, and they emptied that house.
Oh my
And only after they did that could they come to the nursing home to actually visit the people. And I wrote in my book, I said, they could go get the stuff before they could go see the people. And I was very young I was a very young caregiver. I was 29 when this whole thing first started. So here I was, a 29-year-old trying to navigate stuff that people twice my age were trying to do. And then on top of it, I got hit with that. And I was like, I don't even know how you process this. How do you even deal with this kind of thing? So, I've had my share of
and
family drama.
Yeah, I'd like to say that, that's a unique story, but unfortunately it's not. And I have
not so much.
I have a close friend right now who had to go out of town, out of state to help her parents or her mother. Her mother's remarried, but they're in a dire situation. They need to go to assisted living. And so she and her sister have met to clean out the house, which is like a hoarder's nightmare kind of thing. Oh, and, she's the kindest, sweetest person. And she said, there's one thing that I want her sister all along has been saying, I'm taking this, I'm taking that. And she's, fine, whatever. She goes, there's one thing, a small thing that reminds me of childhood, and I would like this. And she called me yesterday and told me her sister just exploded over that one little thing that she wanted. And you know what? She was just like, whatever, fine. I don't even want to go there with you. It's unfortunate though. And it's like, I guess it goes back to, your childhood and your relationship with your parents. And if one person felt like, you were always the favorite, so now I want everything. But, it's kind of hard to process that because for me, fortunately, my mother is still alive, but there's very few things that I want, and I would certainly not fight my brothers on it. If there was something that meant a lot to them, then take it. It's hard to kind of process, but there's a lot of people out there who don't see it the same way, unfortunately.
Exactly. And I can speak from experience. I was stunned that they did that because there was a whole deal with the cost of my grandparents' care. So they were going to have to use Medicaid. Yeah. And as you know, with Medicaid, there's an accounting to the state for what goes where. And they didn't take any of that into account. They just emptied that house without any consideration for what I was going to have to do. And I was like, thank God it all worked out. But it was, I was terrified. I thought, what are they going to do? I didn't know, which all that did was add stress to me as a caregiver. Let me say for the record, for those who are caregivers, you are stressed enough as a caregiver. You don't need anything else to pile on top. And for me, that piled on top. It was like, I didn't know what I was going to do. It was horrible.
Yeah, that's terrible. And if you're not in the position of caregiver, prior to becoming a caregiver, I could talk all day about, caregiver stress, et cetera. But when you're living it, it's a stress like you never imagined.
Suddenly you're like, I get it. I understand. Yes, it all makes sense. I couldn't understand why they acted the way they did. And I was like, I wanted to scream out, do you not understand? I am stressed enough. Why are you adding extra stress? Well, why are you doing this?
Yeah. No, that's unfortunate. In your book, you mentioned the term sleeping volcanoes, and I love that term. Can you tell us what that means?
That is a it was actually a section title where I was talking about this business with my stepbrothers or half brothers. I'm making the same mistake you did. My half brothers, where their mother and the younger half brother got involved in the situation. And they were the ones that took the moving van and emptied the house. And I didn't know, when I contacted them, I didn't know what I was going to run into. Were these people that had no contact with my grandparents. My grandparents I had to bring them away from their home in January. This was June. By the time things got settled down enough for me to think straight, to even know how to start to contact them. So we're talking about a 6-month period. And in that whole time, not once did they go to the house and realize, oh no, they're not home. Where are they? Not once did they call the house, because I had shut down the phone service at their house. So, they weren't reaching out to other relatives going, well, where are they? So there was no contact attempt that I'm aware of at all. So I'm thinking, okay, so you've been all this, that's the time I know about. How long before that had it been since you had any contact? And you didn't even reach out. So, I didn't know what to expect. You think to yourself, okay, they should be glad that I'm the one in the hot seat. I'm the one having to make all the decisions. They should be glad. My husband actually said that to me. He said, they ought to be glad it's you in this position and not them. And I'm like, well, that sounds great on paper, but they seemed very, my takeaway from this whole thing was they were very money driven. And my grandparents didn't have a lot of money. Let's be clear. We were not emptying, the Hearst mansion or anything, it wasn't like that. But it looked like it was an opportunity for money. Either that or they were living in a house with no furniture and they took all of it for themselves. I don't even know. But they took everything, and they were certainly interested in where the money was coming from. How's the will broken up? I guess you're the executor. It was crazy, the questions they were asking. It's like, so the people that you're ready to carve up their estate, they're sitting here, right here in front of you, and you're having this conversation. Really? Is this what you want to say in front of them? Apparently it was.
Wow.
And so my point was, I was like, okay, are you going to now try some kind of legal maneuver? Are you going to try to go get some kind of shark attorney who's going to look for some loophole and try to undermine what I'm doing in caring for my grandparents? So that's what, for me, it was. That phrase was, once we're in here doing this, are you suddenly going to wake to life like Vesuvius? And are you going to blow all over me like, I am so angry at you and how dare you do this? And again, I've seen this happen. I've talked to plenty of caregivers where everything seemed okay until something happens and the one steps in and the other one goes bananas.
Just blow up like the sleeping volcano. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I've seen that happen too.
Yep.
So obviously we want to avoid something like this happening. So what are your 3 best tips to avoid these hurt feelings and the, family strife?
One of the biggest, most important things is telling people ahead of time to get prepared, have the documents in place. The reason I say that is this. And this is funny. I was sitting in a restaurant with my husband a few months ago, and on the other side of the partition from where we were, we couldn't see them, but we could hear them. Something had clearly happened to the matriarch in the family. And there was a group of probably 8 or 10 people. It was a pretty big group. And they had no idea what to do. Nothing was in place, because I was listening to them and they're like, well, so I guess we just go get power of attorney. And I'm just wringing my hands like, okay, that is not how this works. But what do I say? You don't want to interfere. You don't want to, excuse me. And they were over there talking about, well, I just don't know what we're going to do. Who's got this? Who's got that? And I was like shaking my head. My husband and I walked out of there like, this is tragic, but this is the stuff happening every day. This is, you can walk through an ER and listen to this conversation. People don't know what to do. Well, when nobody knows what to do, guess what happens? Everybody stands up and says, oh, well, I'll just do this. Oh, well, I'll take over this part. Well, but is that the way, let's say hypothetically, I always, when I'm speaking, I use mother as my sample patient. So let's say mother has had a catastrophic event. And now mother is incapacitated. Okay, so let's say we got 3 siblings. Well, which one? Which one's going to handle the money? Which one's going to make the medical decisions? which one's going to do all of these things and take care of the business and keep everything moving for mother?
Mm-hmm.
And when there's no one designated, everyone thinks they should be designated. So my husband laughed and he told me, he said, honestly, he said, you are in the position of one who sells life insurance. And I started laughing. I thought, that's the truth. Because, the person selling insurance comes to you and says, you really need this life insurance policy. And you're thinking, no, I don't need that. Everything's fine. We don't need that. That's the trouble. People don't think they need it. And then all of a sudden they're sitting in the emergency room. Something catastrophic has happened to mother. And now you suddenly realize you need it. Well, it's a lot harder to go get it after something's happened. You got to go to court. This takes time and it costs money. It is an ugly, ugly process, not one you want to deal with, but people don't understand that. So I always say, if you can prepare ahead of time, and the beauty of prep ahead of time is mother gets to choose who she wants to do what. Oh, okay. Jane, you are really good with money, so I'm going to put you in charge of my money. And John, you are really good with the medical stuff, so I'm going to let you be the one to make my healthcare decisions. Or it could be that John's no good at anything and Jane's the only one that really is going to do the job. So maybe mother says, you know what, Jane, you've got the whole thing. I'm giving you every carte blanche to do what you need to do to help me out. The thing is, if mother does this ahead of time, this saves a lot of stress because now we know what mother wants, mother chose. And I'm not saying it fixes everything. Invariably, somebody rises up and says, well, now, how do we know you didn't coerce mother? Okay, nothing's perfect. But if you start the prep ahead of time, that can take a lot of stress off of the situation because now at least you do have a roadmap. So
I completely agree. And I think it's important also for parents to have those conversations with their adult children. And I know a lot of times they don't want to have those conversations, but it's definitely, and we suggested even like when everyone's together at Thanksgiving or Christmas, you don't have to get into all the details if you don't want to, because a lot of people don't want to share how much money they have or, whatever, assets, whatever. But, it's so important to say, we have a plan, we have a will. So-and-so's the executor. This is why. And, if they're going to get mad, have those conversations now. The child could say, hey, why did you choose him and not me? It's better to just have all that out, as difficult as it can be, because people don't want to face their mortality. But, you never know what's going to happen. And in my case, I certainly didn't expect my husband at 63 to have a massive stroke on Christmas Day. It wasn't expected. So we did not have everything in place, but I quickly got everything in place for him and for myself because God forbid, I don't want my kids trying to figure out what to do if something happened to me. And I have had those conversations with my oldest. He knows, where everything is, who we contact, my brothers, the executor. We have everything in place. So we don't like having those conversations, but we need to. And like you said, I think that's perfect. Plan it in advance. And then the parent, this is their decision, what they want. If the kids want to fight about it, they need to talk to their parents while they can, not in the moment when now mom or dad is incapacitated and can't answer the questions.
That brings a stress that you cannot imagine. And another one that you're going to face as a caregiver is at some point, some doctor somewhere is going to ask you about a do not resuscitate order. Let me tell you, I've been on that one too. And it is far and away better to know the answer to that ahead of time.
Yeah.
You do not want to be face to face with a physician saying, what do you want us to do? And you don't know the answer. Thank God when it happened with my mom, I knew the answer. And, I was able to make the correct decision that I knew she would have wanted. But man, if I hadn't, I'm talking, that is a recipe for guilt.
Yeah.
Because think about it, no matter what you would tell the doctor in that moment, later you're going to second guess because you don't know, because you didn't talk to mom about it. Well, guess what? If you've talked, you rule that out. You eliminate that possibility. So that's just another one. That's, not only just having these documents in order, but just having a plan in place. What is your thought about resuscitation? Do you want to be connected to some sort of life supporting equipment and, that kind of thing? If you don't talk about it, you won't know.
Yeah, exactly.
You just won't know.
So in your 3 tips to avoid, we've got the first is for the parents, whoever, to be prepared and communicate that. And then the second you had mentioned, and I'd love for you to go more into this, but for everyone to be willing to work together, put your differences aside, and all the kids work together.
Exactly. And again, I kind of chuckle at myself. I'm thinking, well, that just sounds so simple, but it really is the truth. There are times that you do have to lay aside how you're feeling about the situation. In my own case, I'll bring it personal for me. Here I was dealing with these half brothers. Well, I was dealing with these half brothers, and I had this entire relationship with my grandparents. I had the responsibility for everything for them because I had a great relationship with them, but I didn't have a great relationship with their son, who was my biological father, because he had committed bigamy. He had left my mother and me when I was an infant, and he just went off and started this whole new family. So my grandparents knew they couldn't count on him, but they knew they could count on me. So that's why they put me in place. Okay, great. They had prep. Well, then all of a sudden, we're facing the situation. And I had these people looking at me saying, well, why don't you move them to a nursing home that's closer to us so we can help take care of them? And I was like,
oh, wow.
No, you did not just say that. Only wait, yes, you did. So, my first thought was, I was like, won't you step out in the hall and I'll tell you how I feel about this, not in front of our grandparents. But I thought, no, all that's going to do, in my brain, I was thinking it, you're thinking at lightning speed when you're in the situation. What do I do here? What do I do? And I reasoned out. I was like, if I start up with them, all that's going to do is inflame the situation. And that may open a can that if I just keep my cool and I had to look at her. The woman's name was Shirley. I had to look at Shirley and I had to say, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to keep them here. They're settled here. Everything's settled here and we're established here. So this is what we're doing. And she just was like, okay. And I remember thinking, I was like, oh, thank God, that she didn't come unglued and start yelling she was going to get an attorney or something. Because I didn't know. Again, I was young. I did not know what to expect. And so that, like I said, that makes it, that's me sharing a very personal part of my journey. And please let me clarify, I do not mean to sound like, yes, I have my act all together. I'm very calm in every situation. I wish I could say that. But, again, I laugh and tell people, read the book. If you want to know the truth about it, read the book. There were plenty of places where I just had a meltdown. I just came unglued about things that were going on. Stress will do that to you.
Yeah, for sure.
So in that case, thankfully, I was able to kind of hold myself together and say to her what I needed to say without getting ugly. But it is hard. It is very hard. And, as I said, I've got some folks that I've talked to that their siblings that won't talk to each other. And you're thinking, all right, now, wait a minute. If you're not talking to each other, how are you possibly going to help your family, how your parents, mother, father, whoever the care recipient is? But that's a real paradigm that people are experiencing is, well, I'm so mad at them, I'm not going to talk to them. Well, okay, guess who's going to suffer for that?
Yeah.
Mom. Or dad, in other words, the care recipient is going to be the one paying the price for that. So it's like, guys, we need to lay aside the negative feelings that we have. If we've got problems with each other, there needs to be a time and a place for us to talk that out. This is not that time or place. We need to look at what is going to be best for mother. Again, I don't want to sound like I'm saying this is so pat. It's so easy to do. It is difficult. It will take biting your lip, biting your tongue. And you may need to go home and punch the fool out of a pillow on the couch, do whatever you have to do.
Yeah.
I do tell people, go see a therapist. Go tell the therapist everything you think, because man, they're trained to handle it. They can sit there and take it and walk you through it and help you get to a place where you can navigate it and live with it. But for you to just fly apart on the person that's acting ugly, that does no good. No good.
No. And we see that in the placement service, which is the business that I own. We time to time we'll have, one daughter looking this way saying, oh, mom needs assisted living. This is what we're going to do. And then another one taking off going this direction saying, no, she needs something else. She needs memory care, or I want to bring her home. And then there's all this fight. Nobody's talking. And, it becomes a very confusing and difficult situation. And of course, who pays the price? Mom, who is the one who needs the care. And now she's stuck in the middle of all this.
Yep.
And then I know your third tip when we talked earlier is, if you can't get past these hurt feelings, you can't get along, then it becomes a time that you need to call in a mediator.
That is the truth. And what I found when I was researching this book and I was talking about getting a mediator, and I started to do internet searches for mediation, I was thinking I wanted to be able to tell people, all right, here's how you can find somebody. And I thought, well, how many can there be? How many mediators are there out there, really? I was stunned. It is a shocking number. I Googled family mediation, and I could not believe the sheer number of them that came up. And I even talk about that. It's like, you need to understand the sheer number of them that come up shows you how necessary their services are. Mm-hmm. They are not hard to find. I mean, not hard at all. And people say, I talk about, they come at the money angle, and they're like, well, that's got to be, expensive to get a mediator. And what I say to people when I'm talking to individuals or if I'm speaking to a group, I say, here's the thing to think about. Yeah, family mediation has a little bit of a price tag attached to it. But do you know what? Family mediation is less expensive than going to court.
Yeah.
And that tends to be a head turner when people hear that and they start thinking about it, because that's where this stuff winds up, in family court. And you realize when you get into family court and you're arguing with a sibling or a cousin or whoever it may be, you've got a lawyer, they've got a lawyer. And let's be honest, again, we appreciate our legal professionals, but let's be honest, they bill by the hour, so they don't mind. They're not worried about how long it takes. Mm-hmm. And so they're over there going to court, back and forth into court, trying to get everything settled. And meanwhile, again, mother's waiting. Mother's sitting there day after day after day, and mother's not getting the care that she needs because you got these fighting factions while we're waiting for this thing to work its way through the courts. So again, legal proceedings, they are expensive and they take time. So, and I mean, sometimes you have to do it. And thank God that the litigators are there and they can go and hopefully get things settled. My thinking is, why don't we try to get this settled in a more calm way before it gets to that point?
Yeah.
And that's what the family mediator can do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, these are 3 excellent tips. I'm just going to repeat them. So if you want to avoid having the family strife, first, number 1, and most important, is be prepared and make your plans. Let everyone know what your plans are before something happens. 2, for the kids and family members, all be willing to work together, put aside your differences. If you felt you were not the favorite in childhood, that's the past. Deal with it. Not to sound rude, but deal with it. It's time to move on. If you're 60 and still holding on to that, we got to let it go. And then 3rd, if you just can't get past all this, just do call on a mediator. And there are, like Leah said, many, many family mediators out there, which is, you're right. It is alarming that there's that many people who have difficulty getting along, but really, how wonderful that there are professionals there to help you. So call on those professionals. So this is excellent information, Leah. I really appreciate you being on the podcast and sharing this with us.
It is my pleasure. I appreciate having the opportunity to tell people about it. It means so much because it's one way or the other, people are going to face this at some point. Aging parents, people living longer. You want to be prepared. Hopefully it comes to where you don't need the paperwork. Everything's okay. That would be fabulous. But, let's be prepared just in case.
Exactly. And tell us the titles of your 2 books.
My first book is Goodnight, Sweet, A Caregiver's Long Goodbye. That is the story detailing my personal caregiving experience. It covers everything from the phone call that started it all to probating the will when it was over. And while that book was with my publisher actually approached me and said, I want you to write another book. I want you to write the book you wish you had had. So that is where my second book came from. It was a book written to ordinary people. It's not written in legalese. It's not written in medicalese. It's written in ordinary English for people to understand. It is called Caring for a Loved One with Alzheimer's or other dementia, Everything I Wish I Had Known. And that is, it's a small book, and I laugh and tell people it's like a vitamin pill. It's power-packed. It's small, but it's power-packed. It's got a lot of information, but it's convenient to keep in a purse. It's like 74 pages with the glossary. Keep it in a purse, keep it in a backpack or a briefcase. You can keep it with you and have it handy to refer back to.
Okay, excellent. And where can people find your books?
They are on Amazon. You can look on Amazon, just Google my name, or not Google, put my name in the search bar on Amazon and it will pull them right up. Okay,
wonderful. And we will definitely tag you also on the post so people can find you and put your website and everything on there as well, so that anyone who wants to learn more, please go and check out Leah's books. I just got your Everything I Wish I Had Known, but I'm going to go ahead and get your other one too, because I think you have a very interesting story to tell.
There were quite a few elements that were studied. People have read it and been like, I'm amazed at what you experienced. Like, it was different.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you again for being on the podcast. And thank you all for listening. We appreciate you tuning in each week. And please share this podcast with your friends and family members. And we will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.